Well, welcome to Thursday, day 4 of Scuba VBS. And we continue to have a great time, and I hope you're hearing a lot of good stories, and people are returning back their little homework items so we can put some bubbles up on the board. We really love doing that and seeing the kids out there being a blessing in the world, and taking what they're learning here at VBS and taking it out into the world to put it into practice, because that's really what this is all about, right? I mean, we want to not only learn and explore faith, but we actually want to take that and then actually put it into practice out there in the world, because really our faith should make a difference in our day-to-day lives. It should be something that informs what we do, how we engage with people, how we treat each other, and of course for our kiddos, that is a big part of what they're learning at the age they're in, right? It's a lot about school is about. Sure, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, along with all the other things, but it's also socializing. It's also learning how to be with and around each other. So the great thing about VBS is they get a chance to practice that, even in the summer months. But it also is a reminder to us as adults that how we treat each other is and can be a reflection, and is truly a reflection of what it is we believe about ourselves, believe about the world, and believe about our neighbor. And here at our church, the one thing we profess all the time is that God has a pretty simple message for us. God wants us to love God, love our neighbor, and love ourselves. And anything and everything we do is about helping people understand that. Today's Bible story is really the Bible story for anyone involved in the Christian religious tradition, and of course it's the ultimate fate of Christ. So we've talked a little bit about Jesus on the boat. As part of this, Jesus is a little unavoidable in the Christian church, but the story that we're talking about today is kind of the story, which is a story about the trial, death, and resurrection of Christ. And the idea is, to help kids understand, is that Jesus is always there, that Jesus is a friend forever. Thanks God. And that is a lesson for them, and it's also a lesson for us. Now, one thing that I have discovered in my years of being a pastor is that people bring a lot of different understandings to the very basic story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. And because it is such a fundamental part of the Christian tradition, there is so much tradition around it. There's so many interpretations of it, competing interpretations about what it is we should or should not take out of it, and how we should understand it, and what lessons we should learn from it. And of course, a lot of those are sometimes deeply theological and can stray into some fairly complicated territory rather quickly, that even as adults, sometimes we wrestle with to understand the full consequence of what it means and what Jesus's life, death, and resurrection means. How much more so difficult is it for the kids? So obviously VBS, we try to keep everything a little bit basic, and of course this deals with some kind of scary topics. It deals with the idea of death and dying, which is not something that many of us are probably looking for opportunities to talk about with our kids, though many of us have had to walk and work with our kids through that. Maybe the loss of a grandparent or a friend, or whatever. Our kids are not unaware of the concept, either from somebody they know, or maybe a family pet that had to be put down, or whatever it is. They're not unfamiliar with the concept of death. And while obviously VBS is supposed to be a fun and enjoyable time, and it's not something we dwell on, it also is part of our religious tradition, and it's not something that we can completely avoid, nor should we completely avoid either. So what do we do with a story like this? Well, I think the most important thing that we can do with a story like this, both for our kids and for us, is to really focus in on what I think is really the core message of the idea of the cross and the empty tomb. And the core idea there is, at the end of the day, the last word it belongs to God. And that the biggest piece of hope we take away from the story of Christ's whole life, but also this part of it, is that death is not the last word. God gets the last word. And the last word from God is that ultimately everybody around us will get the opportunity to be with God in this life and in the next. And what we see specifically in the story of the cross and the empty tomb, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, is God doing something pretty incredible. God takes this terrible thing, and one thing we can never forget is that the trial and the crucifixion of Jesus were a terrible thing. They were a bad thing, unequivocally, unquestionably bad. It's a terrible thing to do to anybody, let alone somebody who is innocent of the supposed crimes that Jesus was accused of. So not only is it a terrible thing to do, period, it's a terrible thing to do to an innocent person at that. And yet God takes really what is one of the most terrible things you can think of and uses that. He redeems it, if you will, and turns it into one of the most amazing things we can possibly think of. This idea of Christ's resurrection, Easter morning, everything that comes with that. The idea that Christ did for us that which we could not do for ourselves. We are not capable of doing the things that and doing it in the way that Jesus did. Nor do we need to be, because Jesus did it for us. And ultimately, that is the story of Christ's life. That is the story of Easter. That is the story of that whole time, is God taking something terrible and using it to create something wonderful. God has this amazing ability to redeem even the hardest, most difficult things. And so when our kids have gone through difficult things, maybe it's moving and changing schools, and they're focused, of course, on everything they're going to lose in that move or in that changing of schools, or whatever it is. One of the things we have to do is we have to acknowledge that there is loss, right? That they acknowledge that, yes, what they went through was hard or difficult or it was a struggle. Absolutely, that is true. We never want to invalidate that, just like we never want to invalidate the fact that the cross was awful and terrible. And God was able to take that awful, terrible thing and make something wonderful out of it. So the opportunity and the invitation for us today is when we are going through hard and difficult times, when it feels like we are experiencing loss the way the disciples felt like they were losing their teacher, their rabbi, their friend, never to be seen again. When we go through similar times as that, we have an opportunity also to then take the next step beyond acknowledging the loss, which is an important first step. But the next step is starting to be curious about what and how God might show up to make something new or make something good out of the hard time that we are going through. So many of the most important things in life happen to us as a consequence or are born out of something that is a struggle, right? Anybody who's ever had a kid, right? Or, had the opportunity, either to give birth or, in my case, be there when somebody else, my late wife, was giving birth. That is a hard and difficult process. And yet out of that hard and difficult process, something amazing comes into this world. And oftentimes the most amazing things that come into this world are born out of hard and difficult processes. We don't wake up our kids or anybody else being extremely good at basketball, right? That happens because we put a lot of time and energy and effort and sweat and blood and tears, and we really put all this energy and effort into something. And when we do that, we can find a talent for whatever it is that we are trying to achieve. The truth is, in life, very, very few things come easy, and the most important things in life never come easy. There's always some struggle or challenge before we get to that place we want to be. God has this amazing ability to take even the hardest, most difficult, most strongest struggles we may run into. And God's greatest gift that we have through Christ is God's ability to take that hard, awful, terrible stuff and use it, redeem it, if you will, and make something great and amazing and fantastic out of something that at the time we may not be able to see as anything other than terrible. Now, hopefully, our lives are not full of awful and terrible, but even in these small struggles in life, we can always practice this process of, first and foremost, acknowledging the struggle, but then also asking ourselves, I wonder what good, what new thing, what blessing might come out of the struggle that we are going through at this moment. Is it possible that God is our friend forever and that God may show up in some unexpected way? The disciples, even though they listened to Jesus talk for all those years, weren't really prepared for the reality of the empty tomb. And even though he pretty much told them exactly what was going to happen, they still didn't understand it and couldn't understand it until they had experienced it for themselves. And then, of course, Jesus appears to them over and over and over again after the empty tomb to basically explain to them what it is that they had seen, what it is they experienced, and how they were now called to go out into the world and live in a new and different way, which is exactly what they did. So as we kind of work through this, really the most quintessential and essential of Christian stories, I invite you to talk to your kids about it. Talk to them about those places where maybe they are struggling right now. It's not nearly probably going to be as intense as what Jesus and disciples went through, but that doesn't mean it isn't real for them. It's a good time to have a conversation with them about, what's going on in their lives. Where are things not the way that they want it to be? Where are the challenges that they are facing? And then to simply ask the question, what might God and them and you as their loving parent do about it? What interesting, possibly wonderful thing might be born out of the hard time and struggle you are going through right now? Because the story of our faith, the story of Christian faith, has been for 2,000 years God's amazing ability to redeem, to take things that are difficult and turn them into something wonderful. I'm looking forward to tomorrow and what is unfortunately our last day together at Scuba VBS. I hope you and your kids are getting as much out of this as we are. We love doing this every year. We look forward to it every year. We were all admittedly a little tired when it's all over, but it's well worth the effort because this is a lot of hard work. VBS is a lot of time, energy, and effort and expense to make it happen. But oh my gosh, does God take all of that hard work and do something amazing with it. And of course, the most amazing thing that happens is everything that happens in the lives of your all's kiddos and hopefully what they're learning through this process. So, thank you for joining us, and I will see you tomorrow.